Pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome once again. We are here with more HJN content, but more importantly, with all the stuff relating to franchises that I've been talking about for some time. What exactly do we have to show for it this time around? Why don't we go ahead and try our hand at the Halloween series for this installment? So, let's do it. The Halloween series first started off with basically just the holiday itself. Yeah, it was originally done during the Middle Ages as a special event called All Hallows Day, in which that beggars would collect various things, usually dessert items. They were of course meant to be used as exchange items praying for the dead as far back as the 12th century. But these exact times in Europe weren't so great because of a number of reasons. Number one, we had of course the Dark Ages, which mainly stemmed from a number of different events, including a lot of wars and conflicts that were going on from the Nordic regions to as far to the south as even in Italy. And then, one of the biggest reasons why that particular era for Europe became a nail in the coffin itself, and what truly set the stones for the Dark Ages, was the bubonic plague, which in the 13th century was a horrifying massacre that left up to an entire third of the continent of Europe all dead. Mostly because it was a time in which that peasantries and houses with little protection from outside elements, as well as invading rodents, they all became critical factors into what would be known as one of the worst cases of an epidemic in worldwide history. But fast forward several centuries into the future, and in the year 1978, John Carpenter, a man who was fascinated with the holiday known as Halloween himself, would actually go on to conjure up some unique films. Films that centered around one man who doesn't talk very much, but is known for a Captain Kirk mask modified in a number of ways, with some white skin and darkened hair, and usually brandishing whatever weapons that he can find. Whether it be a pitchfork, or a knife, or a shotgun, even his own hands would be used as lethal weapons of destruction against the many victims that he brought up in his own official body count. The Halloween film series, which has been around for nearly 50 years, has made its way into many blockbusters, plus a number of other biased media that we'll be talking about for today. And so, going on with the first Halloween film, it starts off with Michael Myers, a young boy in 1963, who would unfortunately be tossed into a mental institution after it was found that he was brandishing a knife and ending up causing a bit of a ruckus. 15 years would pass before 1978, in which that the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, which by the way, filming location was actually in California, while the town of Haddonfield was actually inspired by a real life place called Haddonfield, New Jersey. Yeah, and I bet you didn't notice that New Jersey apparently was an influence for a lot of slasher films. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, whether it be because that's the state where they were shot on location, or it's because there were towns that names were inspired by real-life towns coming from that state, it all goes down to New Jersey. So, who knows? If I create a slasher series of my own, maybe I'll take a random town from New Jersey and call it my own for the films. Until that happens though, we'll just stick with what we have for the Halloween films. Michael Myers breaks out of the institution, and his doctor, known as Dr. Loomis, whom, of course, is played by the one and only Donald Pleasance. He tails Michael Myers, trying to find out ways he can stop him, and like Myers himself, arms himself to the teeth in many ways, usually with a firearm in hand. In the case of Michael Myers' breakout, though, in the town of Haddonfield becoming a victim of his presence, and eventually his murderous ways, on Halloween night, there of course are a number of victims that get tallied up along the way, including what would be known as a character whom would actually play a critical role later on in the franchise. Basically speaking, Jamie Lee Curtis is known for actually playing a babysitter whom is taking care of a few kids when certain members of the families end up going missing and later found to be dead because of Michael Myers. By the end of the film, while the kids are practically endangered, Michael Myers is supposedly killed off. But as we know, you can't kill the boogeyman. Even Sam Loomis, who was able to put a few shots in him, and even toss him off of the balcony to the ground below, that kind of lesson is basically learned the hard way. Because Myers disappears into nowhere, and that's how the first film comes to an end. A unique cliffhanger, which set the stones for another film which would come out 3 years later, in which not only would Michael Myers be played by a different actor, Dick Warlock, but there would also be some new elements that would show up. Apparently, some structural changes changed within him, mostly because of Dick Warlock's appearance, and also the mask would apparently look a little different. Even Tell It Animated had described it as being more reddish, ginger-haired in a way. But then, of course, we had the likes of, well, the last victim that he had. This apparently was his sister. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that in the last film, Jamie Lee Curtis actually plays his sister. Well, that's become more prevalent, and would actually continue to be more prevalent throughout the sequels. But the thing is that this sister of his turns out to be very persistent, because even when turned into a corner, she herself ends up grabbing a gun, shooting out his eyes, and eventually his own body is set on fire. The thing is, with a lot of stuff that's happened here, they really had to figure out a way to put him down for good. By having 2 bullet holes in his eyes, his entire body being set on fire, this basically conclusifies the Michael Myers version of Halloween, while John Carpenter intended to create another Halloween sort of tradition. Because for those who don't know already, Halloween was actually meant to be more of an anthology series, in a way like The Twilight Zone, which funnily enough actually had its own movie made at around the same time as Halloween 3 came around. Because when Halloween 3 was released, there would also come around the Twilight Zone movie, which took 4 episodes in particular, including which the guy was freaking out in an airplane, as well as the guy being racist to the point in which he's transported to Nazi Germany. Yeah, the Twilight Zone movie wasn't great for what it was, but I really did like it for what it was able to accomplish. It took a lot of great actors, a lot of great source material, and compiled it all in the form of a colored, formatted, modernized remake of the classic episodes of the 1950s and 60s. And I guess you could say that Rod Serling, even though he wasn't around to see it, he probably would have appreciated what they at least tried to accomplish. They tried so hard and got so far, but as Linkin Park would say, in the end, it doesn't even matter. But back to Halloween though. Part 3 took us on a different route, in which that 3 different Halloween masks of a skull, witch, and pumpkin head were all put together for a special event held by a company called Silver Shamrock. And the whole premise? Silver Shamrock created these masks for Halloween night, in which everybody who purchased them would be instructed to put them on, watch the TV, and believe it or not, wouldn't end up dead on the floor. It apparently is a guise created by the company itself after a headstone was apparently discovered to have been stolen, and apparently the headstone itself serves as some sort of conduit for the power that is transmitted through the masks and kills the users if worn while the TV is on. So, as gnarly and crazy as that is, think about this. The kind of fate that was sealed for the Halloween franchise truly came around when all the fans kept begging John Carpenter to bring back Michael Myers. Yeah, so think about it. If they didn't beg him for Michael Myers, we probably would have had a much better franchise, and it probably would have gone around a lot differently. In theory, it probably would have done very similar to Twilight Zone, and probably would have had its own share of success more prominently had it not been for the repetitive nature of Michael Myers and all the crazily bad ways to try and bring him back. The number of retcons that took place and the reboots that came around, they were just all crappy ways to bring him back and keep him going more, until the very present, where we're here now with a newer trilogy that actually ignores a lot of the sequels. So, I could spend all day talking about the rest of the films, but I guess a quick rundown will do. In part 4, Michael Myers wakes up from a 10-year-long coma after that night in '78, which left him shot in the eyes and burning until his death occurred. But then he would come around, grab another mask and jumpsuit, continue hunting for his family. He finds out that his sister is apparently dead, and his niece Jamie is apparently alive, and that becomes his next target. By the end of the 4th film, Jamie ends up becoming just like what Michael Myers has, giving us a bit of a tease as to what would happen in the upcoming sequel, which was, of course, part 5. But it turns out that Jamie was seen as psychotic, and apparently Michael himself had actually survived his fall in a mine shaft and was apparently nursed back to health by some sort of hermit in an underground cave, which he would then escape from. He would continue his hunt for Jamie until eventually being put in jail, and then would be busted out by some guy wearing black and a hat. The 6th film would show up another 6 years afterwards. It would pretty much be the last time Donald Pleasence would make an appearance in the series because, apart from him aging, he, believe it or not, died on set. Yeah, when they were wrapping up production for the film's filming process, he ended up dying in 1995. At around the same time that they had finished things up, he essentially had his fate sealed. A death sentence, if you will, for one of the worst movies of the 90s. And no doubt, Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, was truly a travesty in and of itself that they actually made 2 different versions. I mean, you had the cut that had more of Donald Pleasence in it, in which that he would find out a certain druid tattoo was on his wrist, which apparently served as part of the plot. And of course you had an ending in which that would have Paul Rudd come around. Yeah, that's right. Paul Rudd makes one of his first theatrical appearances, and it wasn't a great outing for him. He was kind of a young, sarcastic idiot on set. No offense to you guys, don't you bother trying to come kill me in my sleep. Because here's the thing though. Paul Rudd does a great job at beating Michael Myers till he basically just falls to the ground. As anticlimactic as that sounds, it is incredible. Compared to the horrible ending in which that it apparently just freezes him in place when a certain set of stones are put in a specific symbol that apparently immobilizes him. And that's apparently how Donald Pleasence, the Loomis character, ends up with the druid tattoo on his wrists. Because apparently Michael Myers was somehow able to switch spots with him, making Loomis now the man wanted for murder. And we basically hear an audible "No!" at the end of the film. That was, believe it or not, the last time that Donald Pleasence ever uttered any dialogue in cinema history. And it was actually not long before his death occurred. So, not at all a good way to end his career, if you ask me. But it doesn't matter though, because a few years after the horrible flop of Halloween 6, there would come around Halloween H2O, which served as one of the most amazing ways to reboot the franchise, but also give us a unique look at how Michael Myers' own sister herself becomes so strong and courageous that Jamie Lee Curtis would not only return for the role, but the character herself would actually fight back against her murderous brother. That is amazing. Even watching it today, I get all rip-roared and cheery like the chicken jockey. It is just that impressive. But then, a decapitation shows up. Yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you truly end a serial killer's life. But they messed it up 5 years later. Because apparently, with how successful H2O was, they just had to make another film, Resurrection. Yeah, not even gonna bother with that. Even Busta Rhymes and the idea of internet streaming, they don't really do much to save that film. No. Both 6 and Resurrection are officially the low points of the franchise. But, of course, we're still not done yet. There was a Rob Zombie duology in 2007 and 2009, which also gave us a unique look at Michael Myers, but set in a more brutalistic and abusive sort of scenario. I guess that's just what happens when you pair a serial killer with a metalhead. I mean, I could take the character a very different way myself. I'm just a rocker, after all, compared to a metaler. One of them is better, after all. Tell me in the comments below, which do you think is better? But after that happened, another 9 years would pass before another reboot would come around. Halloween 2018. This I've actually talked a bit about before, and I also might talk a bit about the sequels that came out after that film came out. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, of course, were all just unique ways to bring back Halloween and Michael Myers himself. A unique trilogy with some ups and downs, like most of the other films in the franchise. It really goes to show, had it not been for those sinister, sarcastic, and whining fans of Michael Myers, we wouldn't have had this mess. Seriously. And all those people kept talking about wanting him to come back. No. I can't even imagine what Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger would end up like if they were being asked to be brought back. Who really wants a crappy Jason or Freddy film here in the slobbering 20s? Ain't it enough that we already got a 2022 Chainsaw Massacre film? Seriously, there were guys pointing their phones at Leatherface. That's kinda all you need to know, that slasher films don't really need to be brought back anymore. But you know what? It's all fine. The latest trilogy actually does a really good job for what it is. And while some expectations were a little high, we can at least agree they could have done much worse. Especially Halloween Kills. The fact they released it a year later is already disappointing. But to see what it really is, it just shows they didn't really care much about it. Halloween Ends, of course, at least gives us an ending that we're all looking for the franchise. The whole town of Haddonfield comes together, picks up Michael's now dead body, and puts it in a shredder. And that is actually even better than the ending of H2O, or the ending of Halloween 2, 1981. So, the best ending the franchise has to offer. That's how you truly end a franchise, by the way. You don't just create some sort of crazy druid conspiracy or have the guy in black come around and bust the guy out of jail, and you definitely don't have a doctor character yell out the word no right before he dies. In real life, that is. No, man. You take the deceased killer, have the entire town congregate for the next 5 minutes, and parade down the street to carry this horrible killer down to where he deserves. Not a graveyard, not a jail cell, not someone's farm to be buried in. The shredder, where his body can be broken down into little chunks for the whole world to see. So, the end. Hopefully. Anyways, though, that's all I got to say about today's piece for HJN. But if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.